O Great Spirit, O Goddess, O God, we ask for your blessings, your guidance, your inspiration on our time together. And we offer this chant. And we sense how the sound and the chant has changed us in some way. We know that something has happened. Because what we know is that we create a field. We know we have a field of our energy body, a field around us that influences the wider world. And we know that when we come together as a group and we work together either in ritual, in ceremony, in celebration, in worship, in magic, for all these reasons, with consciousness and intent, we affect the field and we create a field amongst us. And this in turn, like ripples in the pool, affects the wider world. Druidism is a spiritual way that is an ancestral indigenous tradition of Western Europe, but which now speaks to a lot of people because it's a way of returning to the source. You know, there's no doubt that we're coming to the end of a chapter in the story of humanity. It's not the end of the book, I hope, as some people believe, but the end of a chapter. And when you come to the end of a chapter, you get the story comes full circle. And so you see a lot of people turning to ancestral traditions now, returning back up to the source. And in Druidry we have this image of the salmon leaping upstream to the source. And that's a very graphic image, I think. And I think that's what humanity is doing now in consciousness. A lot of people are attempting to return to the source. Because there's a way in which spiritual traditions tumble out from the divine world, if you like, tumble down into our world, and through time they get crystallized and fossilized, which is what you see in some of the major religions, where it becomes fossilized into dogma. And the true sources of spiritual nourishment, the primal forces of the god and the goddess and of fire, earth, water, of the natural landscape and so on, those are the sources that feed people and that people want to return to now.
Well, that's great, but you are a leader of the Druids. You've written books about the Druid lore, about plants, stuff like that. What does Druidism mean for you personally?
What it means for me personally is it feels to me as if the whole world around us is showering us with gifts. The natural world has gifts all the time. But the way conventional society works is that we don't access these gifts. And so Druidry has this idea and exercises and rituals and methods for opening us to these gifts so we can feel more alive and vibrant and vital and more connected to life.
Now, most people know that Druid plants and trees are very well connected, but how are you connected to, say, the stones and the air?
Well, you know, in Druidry there's the idea of elixirs. You know, the old Asterix cartoons, which are funny, of course, but they're also, they happen to be true in as much as the Druids work with elixirs. And we have this idea of two elixirs, Arwen, inspiration that flows through us and that we can encourage in our work, but also Nuifre, the life current, the life force, which flows through stones, through trees, through plants, through the natural world and through our bodies. And so many of the techniques of Druidry today are designed to help us open to that flow and to cultivate it and stimulate it within us.
Sonder Reinhardt, he's an Indian, a Yaqui Indian.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And again, a big movement around the world now is realizing this family, coming to really understand that, and working with spiritualities and spiritual paths and ways that bring us back into touch with an awareness of the family, which we never left, but which we've been deluded into thinking that we've left.
The 21st century is here. what is the message of Druidism to the people? Talks about the family of
it
nature.
Might seem strange to be looking at ancestral traditions
family,
in the 21st
human
century,
beings, but the family of nature is much wider.
Absolutely vital
is that
now,
shared by the
because
Druids?
as we reach this critical stage in the history of humanity, we're reaching a time where things have to change. Things have to come to an end, and something new has to develop. And as I said, when things come towards a close, we go back. We go full circle back to the beginning. And so now we're returning to the ancestral sources and the early sources of spirituality, which are free from dogma and the clutter of too many beliefs and structures and so on, back to the primal sources. And in that way we can be nourished spiritually and hopefully introduce ideas, impulses, love into the world that can be of value today. So what we do is, the way we begin our gatherings is we always invoke the spirit. Why? Because the central idea in Druidism is there's more than just us. We celebrate the fact that we exist in our physical bodies and we enjoy that, but we also celebrate the fact that there is more than just us. And the way that we do this is we chant this sound, and of course it sounds a little like Amen, it sounds a little like Aum or Om. You know, it has a combination of these two things. So now I'd invite you to do this. This sound combines the male sound, the father sound of Ah, the female mother sound of Oo, and the child sound, the product of the union of father and mother, and like that, which is creativity. Another great theme in Druidism, creativity, bringing gifts into the world. This is something that we're doing not just for ourselves, just to feel good, and it does feel good, but also for the wider world. And what happens when we do it is, you notice, if you're sensitive, you notice that something changes. It settles you in some way, it calms you, and it opens you up. So then the question is, what does it open you up to? Well, the answer is, it opens you up to these two elixirs that I mentioned, Awen and Nuifre. Awen is an elixir that flows not for everybody. You can spend a whole life without being inspired, without inspiration. But the other elixir, Nuifre, which is the life force of chi, prana, if you like, it flows through everybody. Otherwise, if it doesn't flow through you, you're dead. However, what spiritual teachings insist is that there are ways in which one can enhance the quality of this life force. And this is one of the works of Druidry and also of other traditions too. Just unhappiness in the modern world. The myth, or not the myth, the idea of romantic love. And the idea that the only way we can be really happy is when we're paired up and we're madly in love. When it's like the movies, you know? And we know from scientific studies that it lasts about 18 months. You know, what is it, epinephrine, dopamine, I can't remember, one of the neurotransmitters, that when you fall in love, your brain starts to secrete, and you have that wonderful, ill, mad, fantastic, horrible feeling of being in love. But the message from the advertising and the TV and the movies and the books is always, this is the summum bonum. This is the thing that we're searching for. They've taken what's essentially a spiritual idea, the idea of the spiritual marriage, the alchemical wedding, translated it into a mundane form, and suggested that's the only way you can find happiness. So that condemns all of the population who aren't paired up, all the people who aren't in love, all the people who are not in successful relationships, and so on. How many is that? 80%, 70%, 90%, 95%? I don't know, there's a lot of people. Yeah, a lot of people. So everybody, we're all carrying this little burden that actually life isn't as good as it could be. It could be really good if we were in Paris with this fabulous man or woman, you know, in a big bed somewhere, you know, with lots of chocolates and pizzas and champagne and stuff. You know. When really, the thing that spirituality does, a valuable spirituality, is it plugs us back in again. It says you don't have to get, that's a wonderful thing to happen, and I'm not denying the fact that you can fall in love and that romantic love is wonderful. I'm not denying that at all. But what I'm saying is that there's a whole bank of plugs to plug into. You haven't just got one socket, the romantic love socket, and nothing else. We've got loads of sockets. That's a terrible image, but I can't think of a better one.